The first clean image came from a loading dock in Crystal City, Virginia, where two federal contractors were caught feeding gray file boxes into an industrial shredder after a judge had already ordered every record in that building preserved. I was watching it on a studio monitor with one earpiece half in, one hand around a paper cup of coffee I had not touched, and a producer asking me if I could explain why a dead Cold War continuity program had police tape around it. I said I could explain the shape of it. I could explain the old rumors. I could explain why the words Earth 2.0 had floated around defense circles for years without ever meaning the same thing twice. What I could not explain, not yet, was why the White House press pool had just been told to stay in place and why the Department of Defense had locked down its historical budget archive. That was where the day stopped being another leak story. Leaks usually arrive with motive, timing, and a little theater. This one came out ugly and uncontrolled. The first packet landed in the hands of a congressional staffer from Ohio, then a reporter in Richmond, then a lawyer in Bethesda who had spent 15 years suing over missing military payroll records. It was not one document. It was a pattern. Classified budget amendments, old launch manifests from Cape Canaveral and Vandenberg, environmental research grants that never produced public papers, personnel files for engineers, agronomists, geneticists, pressure vessel inspectors, pediatric surgeons, and school administrators who vanished from ordinary records between 1979 and 1996. The project name appeared in pieces: Earth 2.0, Continuity Habitat, Shearwater, Civilizational Reserve, Aurora Gate. At first, the public version made sense because it stayed small. People thought it was a bunker network. That would have been believable. The United States built hardened command sites, communications relays, underground storage, alternate government facilities, and a whole stack of emergency plans during the Cold War. Some were real, some were paper, some were built, staffed, and later abandoned without any clean public explanation. I had covered enough of that world to know how rumors grow. A tunnel becomes a city. A supply depot becomes a secret nation. A command post becomes a second government. So when the first anchors asked me if Earth 2.0 was a bunker under the Rockies, I told the truth. I said maybe. I said the records pointed to something larger, but large did not mean impossible. Then the old launch records appeared, and the bunker theory died in front of everyone. The manifests were not clean enough for a hoax and not neat enough for a planned disclosure. That mattered. Fake documents usually try too hard. These had the ugly smell of real procurement, wrong dates, changed item numbers, missing signatures, shipping weights that did not match declared payloads. A Department of Energy material transfer order for shielded reactor components marked for a weather satellite program. A National Aeronautics and Space Administration environmental control study billed through a university in Colorado, then routed to a naval facility in Maryland. A Soviet-era cross-reference from a declassified British memo about sealed agricultural cylinders moved through Canada under diplomatic cargo protection. A private aerospace firm in California invoicing for Habitat hinge assemblies under a missile. Warning contract, boring words, boring invoices. The kind of paperwork that survives because nobody expects ordinary people to read it. The producer in my ear kept asking if I was ready. I was not. Nobody was. I had been retired for 6 years. I lived outside Alexandria, watched the deer eat my neighbor's hostas, fixed bad hinges in my kitchen, and tried not to talk on television unless somebody died who deserved context. That morning, I had been called because I had spent the better part of 30 years covering defense budgets, continuity planning, missile defense, and the strange little hallway where military secrecy and civilian government shake hands with no cameras present. I had heard Earth 2.0 whispered twice in my career. Once by a drunk Senate aide after hearing on hardened communications. Once by an Air Force colonel at a retirement dinner in Arlington who told me with no smile on his face that the real lifeboat was not under American soil. I did not print it back then. Good reporters do not build stories from loose talk over warm bourbon. That is not discipline, that is ego. I checked what I could check, found nothing solid, and let it die. For years I told younger reporters that every empire builds ghost stories around its own paperwork. It made people feel smart to say there was another layer. Most of the time there was another layer, yes, but it was usually fraud, waste, fear, or somebody hiding a program that did not work. I believe that until the White House Deputy Press Secretary stepped to the lectern that afternoon, opened a blue folder and said the United States government could confirm the existence of a continuity environment known in several planning documents as Earth 2.0. The press room went silent in a way I had never heard from that room. Not respectful silence, not shock. More of a hard stop. 100 professionals heard a sentence that did not fit inside normal American politics. The Deputy Press Secretary did not say planet, he did not say colony, he did not say alien. He read from a cleared statement and kept both hands on the folder. Decades earlier, he said, under emergency continuity planning, the United States and partner governments participated in the development, access, and maintenance of a controlled off-world environment intended to preserve human biological, technical, cultural, and agricultural capacity following a global catastrophe. He said the program was suspended from public disclosure due to national security concerns and international obligations. He said more information would be released in stages. That was the confession, even though it tried to sound smaller than it was. Controlled off-world environment, human biological capacity, agricultural capacity, partner governments. Decades. I watched reporters shout over one another, and I knew the official language was designed to hold back the only question that mattered. Who got a seat? No one in the room asked about launch physics first. No one asked about oxygen first. No one asked how it had been hidden. The first human question pushed through all the formal language. Who was chosen and who was left outside? I went on air 8 minutes after that statement. I had no script. I had 4 pages from the leak, a government statement, and half a lifetime of old context I suddenly did not trust. I told viewers the first thing I needed to say was boring and important. Earth 2.0 was almost certainly not another Earth in the way movie posters sell it. No government had secretly found a green planet close enough for Cold War rockets and hidden the travel schedule in the petty cash drawer. The words meant a managed environment, something sealed, something built or accessed, something with air, water, crops, power, medicine, and enough space to keep a selected population alive for a long time. That still meant the world had been lied to in a way ordinary citizens could feel in the gut. The phones started failing before the markets did, not because the network broke, at least not right away. People were calling every federal office, every university department, every aerospace contractor, every old military base, every newspaper archive, every local courthouse with a missing person from 1987. My daughter called twice and left one message. I did not listen until later. The studio line flashed with calls from people who had watched a grandfather take a job overseas and never come home. People remembered neighbors who said a cousin had been accepted into a classified program. People remembered a school principal in Kansas who disappeared after a Department of Agriculture fellowship. People remembered a dentist in Norfolk, a nurse in Santa Fe, an irrigation engineer in Fresno. Memory became evidence faster than any official could slow it down. The government tried to hold the frame. Officials said participation was limited, historic, legally reviewed, and no longer operational in its original form. That phrase caused immediate damage, no longer operational in its original form. Any decent lawyer would have crossed it out. Any honest official would have explained it. Instead, it sat there with all the weight of something alive behind a locked door. The Secretary of Defense appeared next to the Director of National Intelligence and the Secretary of Energy, which told me this was not just a space story. Energy meant reactors, fuel, shielding, and long-term systems. Intelligence meant foreign partners and hidden communications. Defense meant access control. No one from housing, education, labor, or public health stood at that podium. That absence told citizens exactly where ordinary families had ranked. By late afternoon, the first verified map went public. It was not a map of Earth 2.0 itself. It was a map of supporting facilities on this planet. A pressure systems plant outside Newport News. A genetics archive near Fort Collins. Seed storage transfers through Ames, Iowa. A closed life support testing facility in Huntsville. A launch integration warehouse near Vandenberg Space Force Base. A sealed training school in rural Pennsylvania that had been listed for decades as a disaster education center. A medical rotation program routed through Bethesda, Houston, and San Diego. It looked less like one secret base and more like a second set of arteries running through the ordinary country. People in those places did what people do when history kicks the front door. A crowd formed outside the old Newport News facility before sunset. Not activists at first, welders, retired machinists, a woman with oxygen tubing who said her father worked there and died without a proper pension, because his records were sealed. A school bus driver from Hampton held up a photograph of a pressure ring on a flatbed truck and shouted that he had seen those loads at night when he was 19. A local television crew found a retired security guard who remembered trucks leaving under tarps with federal escorts, no company logos, and no destination. He said he asked once and got transferred to day shift by the following week. That was how the story became local everywhere. The national secret had addresses, it had time cards, it had widows. It had towns that lost smart young workers to fellowships and never got a straight answer. It had county records with property transfers, marked by shell companies. It had old airport manifests with cargo weight limits waived. The people who built pieces of Earth 2.0 did not get seats in it. That point cut deeper than the science. I had covered war funerals, waste scandals, failed weapons programs, and contractor fraud. Public anger has different temperatures. This one turned hot fast because every household understood the insult. Taxpayers had funded a lifeboat with no public passenger list. The first night of confirmation, officials released the basic architecture because silence was making it worse. Earth 2.0 was not a planet. It was a constructed and expanded habitat inside a natural subsurface void beneath the moon's farside highlands, connected over time to excavated chambers, buried pressure corridors, agricultural cylinders, reactor galleries, water recovery systems, and archive vaults. The initial discovery came from classified lunar survey data during the late Cold War, then moved into a multinational continuity program after intelligence analysts concluded that nuclear war, pandemic, ecological collapse, or asteroid impact could destroy national recovery capacity. The moon gave distance, radiation risk, logistics problems, and one decisive advantage. No crowd could walk up to the gate. That last part was not in the statement. I said it because it was true. Bunkers on Earth have gates. Gates can be surrounded. Gates can be bombed. Gates can be starved. Gates can be betrayed by guards with families outside. A lunar habitat had a brutal kind of security. Launch access was the gate. Only states and major contractors could reach it. That meant selection could be hidden inside mission crews, cargo classifications, medical trials, research rotations, and sealed diplomatic transfers. It also meant anyone outside the system had no practical way to demand entry. A citizen could protest at the Capitol, but the door was 250,000 miles away. The public heard moon and split into two camps within minutes. One camp said impossible. The other camp said obvious. Both camps were too comfortable. Impossible was wrong because closed ecological systems, nuclear power, lunar regolith shielding, water recycling, seed banks, and modular pressure structures had been studied for decades in public and private settings. The hard part was scale, secrecy, and transport, not the basic idea that humans could keep a sealed habitat running with enough money and enough ruthless planning. Obvious was wrong because hiding a thing this large required thousands of people to touch only small pieces. Not one giant conspiracy meeting where everyone wore black suits and nodded. The documents showed that method clearly. A contractor in Texas built crop lighting rigs without knowing the destination. A hospital in Maryland trained surgical teams for remote austere care without telling residents that remote meant off-Earth. A school curriculum group in Pennsylvania designed compressed education programs for small isolated populations. A packaging company in Ohio made high-density shelf-stable food containers under a hurricane preparedness contract. A naval lab studied human waste recovery in closed ships and transferred findings to a civilian environmental project. Each piece had a plausible reason. Every piece helped the same hidden machine. That was the part I kept trying to explain while the studio filled with new pages and frightened producers. A secret does not need everyone inside it. A secret needs compartments, penalties, money, patriotism, and enough ordinary people with mortgages. It needs a welder told not to ask questions. It needs a clerk told the file is classified. It needs a scientist told the research will save lives one day. It needs a grieving spouse told the accident report is sealed for national security. It needs courts willing to defer. It needs journalists, including me, who hear one strange sentence at a dinner and decide there is not enough to print. I said that on air and regretted how honest it sounded. I did not mean to make myself part of it. I also did not want to hide behind hindsight. The record matters. I missed it. A lot of people missed it. Some missed it because the state hid it well. Some missed it because the truth sounded too large to publish without ruining a career. That is a coward sentence if used wrong. But it is also how institutions survive. They do not defeat questions. They make the questioner look unserious until the question gets old. The first protests outside federal buildings were not organized by political parties. That came later. The first people outside the Department of Agriculture building were farmers and seed workers. The first people outside the Department of Energy were retired plant engineers and utility workers. The first people outside the Pentagon were families with old photographs in plastic sleeves. A man from Roanoke stood in front of a camera with his mother's nursing license and said she vanished during a federal infectious disease rotation in 1988. A woman from Omaha said her husband worked on water recovery units and came home crying for 6 months before dying of a stroke at 47. Nobody at the podium had an answer for those people. The second government briefing made the first one look soft. Officials admitted Earth 2.0 had population protocols. The first wave included technical staff, medical teams, agricultural specialists, mechanical trades, teachers, security personnel, command authorities, and a limited number of family units. The phrase family units caused a shout in the press room that the microphones caught. A reporter asked if elected officials had reserved places. The deputy secretary said continuity of constitutional governance was considered during early planning, then refused to elaborate. That was enough. By dinner time, every sitting senator, every retired president, every billionaire with a space investment, and every defense contractor family had people digging through names. The stock market did not crash in one clean plunge, it stuttered. Aerospace firms froze trading. Insurance firms issued risk statements. Mining companies with lunar research partnerships took off, then stopped when regulators halted several tickers. Banks saw withdrawals in counties tied to listed facilities. Not because people thought money no longer mattered. People thought the social contract had been edited without notice. That is worse for markets than fear. Fear can be priced. Betrayal keeps moving. By late night, the first confirmed candidate list leaked. It was an evaluation roster, not a passenger list, and officials made that distinction again and again. It included doctors, engineers, pilots, botanists, language teachers, software architects, machinists, water chemists, and a smaller number of children evaluated for family genetic diversity. The criteria were clinical, enough to turn the stomach: age, fertility range, chronic disease status, psychological adaptability, non-political skill transfer, cultural continuity value, genetic disease markers, dependence acceptable, dependence disqualifying, marital stability, security risk, faith and community leadership potential. No list of people can look clean after citizens learn it was made for survival after everyone else died. My wife's name appeared near the bottom of page 42. I saw it while a junior producer was sliding pages across the desk. Elaine Porter, pediatric trauma nurse, Fairfax County, evaluated 1991, secondary medical reserve, dependent status none, spouse media exposure concern. The room kept moving, but my part of it went quiet. Elaine had been dead 9 years by then. Cancer, not mystery. Real hospital bed. Real bills. Real hospice nurse with tired hands. She had never gone to the moon. I need to be clear about that. But someone had evaluated her for a place I did not know existed, and someone had considered me a security concern without ever saying my name to my face. I did not talk about Elaine on air for another hour. There was too much else, and the country did not need my personal wound sitting on top of a national one. Still, it changed how I read the documents. Before that page, Earth 2.0 was a state crime with engineering attached. After that page, it had been in my house. It had passed near my kitchen table. Elaine must have filled out forms for some remote pediatric emergency program or continuity medical fellowship and decided it was not worth mentioning. Or maybe she was nominated without knowing. That happened too. The lists had names from hospital systems, military personnel offices, universities, and professional boards. Some people had been selected by database before any human ever called. The next morning brought the thing that turned a scandal into a crisis. The first message from Earth 2.0 hit the public through another leak, not through official release. It was a short text block, all capital letters in the original transmission log, received through a lunar relay path that the National Aeronautics and Space Administration had publicly described as inactive. The message read, "Do not send anyone else. Do not attempt crew transfer. Do not transmit command restoration packets. Earth Origin Authority no longer recognized. This is a closed habitat under local civil control. Maintain distance." I read that sentence 3 times before I spoke. Local civil control. That was not a malfunction. Machines do not usually write political claims without a human structure behind the words. Officials tried to say the authenticity was under review. That lasted 17 minutes. A former communications officer who had worked at Goldstone in California confirmed the formatting. A contractor in Maryland confirmed the encryption family. A retired British signals analyst said the cadence matched old Earth 2.0, emergency traffic. By breakfast, the government had to admit contact had been maintained in some form after the original program was supposedly suspended. That word supposedly did a lot of work all week. The message changed the public question. It was no longer only who got chosen. It became who controls it now. The original program had been built for preservation, but a preserved population does not remain a storage item forever. Children born there would become adults. Adults born there would have no memory of oceans, highways, grocery stores, elections, county fairs, church basements, summer jobs, bad landlords, traffic tickets, or voting in a school gym. Earth would be a place in lessons and warnings. Original Earth would be the dangerous parent world that kept sending orders and hiding truth. That is not science fiction emotion. That is normal human development inside a sealed institution. The official line tried to calm that down. The Secretary of State said the United States respected the safety of all personnel and descendants associated with the continuity environment. Personnel and descendants. That phrase confirmed birth generations. A reporter asked how many. No answer. A second reporter asked if anyone born in Earth 2.0 had United States citizenship. No answer. A third asked if the habitat had a government. No answer. The absence of answers became its own map. By the second day, the old witnesses started coming out because the secrecy was already cracked. A retired Air Force loadmaster from Florida said he flew sealed human transfer modules from an inland medical facility to Cape Canaveral in 1989. He thought the modules were quarantine equipment. A woman in Huntsville said her mother taught mathematics to remote mission children through recorded lessons for 10 years and was told never to mention it. A Canadian agronomist released a letter from his father describing dwarf wheat trials in 1/6 gravity analog beds. A former Soviet engineer's grandson posted scanned notes about joint seed redundancy under permanent night external conditions, which made more sense once people understood lunar shielding. None of that meant every claim was true. I said so every half hour because panic breeds fraud. A man in Nevada said he had been to Earth 2.0 through a tunnel under Area 51. That was nonsense. A woman selling survival supplements claimed her uncle had maps of the moon-based drainage system. Fraud. A retired contractor said he serviced a lunar elevator in Arizona. Also fraud. Real secrets attract fake experts fast because attention becomes money. I told viewers to look for documents, names, dates, payroll, shipping, medical boards, and court records. Feelings do not confirm history. Paper does not always tell the truth, but paper can be cross-checked. The real paper kept getting worse. One budget table showed annual human continuity sustainment spending hidden under layered strategic resilience accounts through the early 2000s. A second showed a dramatic reduction, then a shift to autonomous support, remote manufacturing, and local governance stabilization. That matched the message. Earth 2.0 had not simply been abandoned. It had been cut loose, or it had cut itself loose, or both sides had agreed to use that language until it became too embarrassing. The public had been told nothing because the public would ask the same question every year. Why are selected people still supplied while hospitals close, bridges fail, and veterans wait months for treatment? At street level, anger turned practical. Parents' school records. Hospitals wanted personnel lists. Unions wanted sealed contract files opened. Counties wanted property taxes repaid by shell companies. Families wanted death certificates corrected. Churches held meetings for people who believed loved ones had been taken. Some were wrong. Some were not. That was the cruel part. A false hope and a true secret can stand in the same room, and no official form can separate the damage cleanly. I remember a call from a woman in Dayton because it stayed with me. She was calm, which made it harder. Her father had been a machine tool instructor. He disappeared during a federal training trip in 1993. The family received a death notice from a car accident in New Mexico, but no body came home. She asked me on live television if Earth 2.0 meant he might still be alive. I told her I did not know. I would not give comfort, I could not defend. I said if he had gone in 1993, age and habitat medicine made survival possible but not guaranteed. She thanked me for not lying. That is the kind of sentence that ruins your sleep. By the third day, Congress stopped pretending it was waiting for full briefings. Members from both parties demanded passenger lists. The intelligence committees demanded closed sessions. The public demanded open ones. A senator from Michigan asked whether Earth 2.0 contained genetic samples from citizens who never consented. The Secretary of Health and Human Services said medical sample retention standards had changed over time. That was not an answer. It was a legal hiding place. People heard it and understood enough. The genetic archive became the next fire. Officials confirmed seed banks. Livestock germplasm, microbial libraries, and human medical reference material had been transferred. Human medical reference material is a cold phrase. It can mean cell lines, blood samples, tissue samples, reproductive material, and genetic data. The government refused to define the full range. That refusal made every fertility clinic, military medical exam, newborn screening program, and research hospital in the country look suspicious. A lot of suspicion was unfair, some was earned. Trust is not a switch that flips back because an official says standards were followed. The Earth 2.0 supporters appeared too, and dismissing every one of them would be lazy. Some citizens said the program proved somebody had planned ahead. They asked what good disclosure would have done during the Cold War. They asked if public debate could have built a lunar habitat before nuclear war. They said ugly selection was still better than total extinction. Some of those arguments had logic. I said that on air and got hammered for it. But logic can be true and still not clean. A secret lifeboat built by democracies creates a moral debt that no later briefing can erase. I kept coming back to one thing. Continuity planning is not evil by itself. A country should plan for catastrophe. A hospital should have backup power. A city should have water reserves. A government should preserve records. Seed banks are not sinister. Emergency communications are not sinister. Hardened command centers are not sinister by default. The line was crossed when survival became a hidden selection system for human worth, funded by people who were never told the criteria and could never appeal the result. That was the wound, not planning. Exclusion without consent. The first technical deep dive aired on the fourth day because people needed something solid under all the rage. I explained the likely habitat system in plain terms based on leaked diagrams and old public research. Lunar regolith gives radiation shielding if piled deep enough over pressure spaces, lava tubes if stable, reduce excavation needs and provide natural cover. Water can be recycled, but losses never go to zero. Oxygen can come from water and chemical processing. Food needs crop cycles, stored nutrients, pollination methods, pest control, light, heat, and workers who do boring tasks every day without drama. Closed habitats are not magic gardens. They are factories for breath, water, calories, and sanitation. That mattered because citizens had begun to imagine Earth 2.0 as a luxury retreat for officials. The truth looked stranger and worse. Early photographs leaked from an archive showed white pressure corridors, crop racks, compact sleeping quarters, exercise frames, medical bays, schoolrooms, tool lockers, hydroponic lettuce channels, dwarf wheat beds, and children wearing soft helmets during a low-gravity evacuation drill. No marble, no beaches, no billionaire resort. It was a harsh place built by people who expected Earth to burn. That did not excuse the secrecy. It made the human choice sharper. Selected people lived under strict limits while everyone else unknowingly paid for a future with no seat. The low-gravity question became a national obsession for about 6 hours, mostly because people wanted something easier than ethics. Could children grow there? What happened to bones, muscles, hearts, pregnancy, balance, immune systems? The leaked medical papers showed rotating sleep and exercise compartments, resistance rigs, hormone monitoring, and eventual construction of centrifuge housing for children and pregnant women. That explained the habitat hinge assemblies from the California invoices. It also proved the program had not been a temporary shelter. No one builds multi-generation gravity mitigation for a weekend bunker. The White House then admitted the population estimate, not the exact count, a range, between 30,000 and 46,000 living persons associated with Earth 2.0, including surface support rotations, archive custodians, and locally born residents. The number hit the country in a strange way. Too large to dismiss, too small to forgive. 30,000 people could fit in a small town. 46,000 could fill a college stadium. The world had spent decades arguing over war, disease, famine, debt, and climate, while a town's worth of chosen human continuity lived behind a gate. No voter had seen. Foreign governments started confirming pieces because the United States could no longer hold the story alone. The United Kingdom admitted historical participation in archival and command continuity planning. France confirmed agricultural genetics work. Canada confirmed cold region life support studies connected to classified international resilience programs. Russia said the Soviet Union had participated in early continuity negotiations but claimed later access had been restricted by the United States. China denied involvement at first, then demanded inspection rights. India called for United Nations oversight. Brazil asked if Amazonian biological samples had been transferred without consent. The crisis stopped being American by the end of the week. That widened the danger. A secret shared by rivals can survive while each side benefits from silence. Once exposed, each government tries to look less guilty than the next. Old alliances cracked in public. Former officials blamed dead predecessors. Defense ministries released selective files. Intelligence veterans contradicted one another. The United Nations Security Council scheduled emergency sessions and then argued over whether Earth 2.0 counted as a sovereign entity, an international facility, a breakaway colony, a military installation, or a human rights emergency. None of those labels fit cleanly. Every label carried consequences. The second message from Earth 2.0 arrived during that argument. This one was not leaked by a staffer. It was released by the government after 3 hours of pressure and one visible fight inside the White House briefing room. The message was longer and calmer than the first. It said incoming transfer attempts would be refused. It said original Earth Command Authority had expired after repeated treaty violations, unilateral population revisions, and unauthorized archive demands. It said Earth 2.0 Local Council had assumed civil authority in accordance with Continuity Charter. Amendment 7. It said no further genetic material, personnel, or political appointees would be accepted from Original Earth. That phrase, Original Earth, did real damage. People hated it instantly. It sounded clinical. It sounded judgmental. It also sounded learned. A child born in the habitat would need a term for this planet. Earth would not be enough if his home was also called Earth 2.0. Original Earth was accurate from his point of view. That accuracy made people angrier. Nobody likes hearing a stranger name his home in a way that moves it into the past. Officials refused to release Charter Amendment 7, so another leak did it. The amendment was written after something called the Nereid contamination event in 2012. That was the first time the story bent away from politics and into fear. Nereid was listed as an agricultural water loop, not a place. The event involved microbial spread through nutrient channels, crop loss, quarantine of 2 habitat sectors, and temporary suspension of inbound biological material from Earth. Casualty count was redacted in one copy and visible in another. 112 deaths, 31 children. No one on Earth had been told. I want to be careful here because the internet went insane with that line. It was not proof of aliens. It was not proof of monsters. It was a closed habitat with crops, water, people, microbes, stress, and secrecy. A contamination event in such a place could kill fast without anything supernatural. A fungus, bacterium, virus, algal bloom, chemical imbalance, or immune problem could move through shared systems before crews understood the source. Earth hospitals struggle with infections in open cities. A sealed lunar farm would be less forgiving. The horror was not that something impossible happened. The horror was that something ordinary happened in a place built on the promise of control. The amendment gave the local council emergency authority to reject inbound transfers during biological, political, or structural instability. Political instability was the word that mattered later. It meant Earth 2.0 had learned to see people from Earth as a risk category. Not just germs, politics, command claims, class resentment, religious pressure, national demands, billionaire influence, military orders. All the noise of this planet, compressed inside a sealed habitat, could destroy the thing faster than any cracked pipe. That was not paranoia. That was a management assessment, and it was probably written by people who had watched Earth officials try to use the shelter for favors. The first sign of that came from an old email chain between a deputy national security advisor and a private donor group from 2008. The donors wanted emergency family access in exchange for funding expanded industrial support. The request was denied by program staff, then reopened by political appointees, then blocked again by Habitat medical officers. One line from the Habitat side became famous by noon. Earth wealth has no survival value here unless Earth Command chooses to make it a weapon. The public loved the line for about 1 day, then realized it came from people who already had the gate locked. By the 5th day, Washington had 3 crowds. One demanded full admission into Earth 2.0 for lottery-selected citizens. One demanded the habitat be cut off and all funding stopped. One demanded prosecution of every living official connected to the selection program. Police set barricades around federal buildings, but this was not a normal protest season. Grandmothers stood beside veterans. University students stood beside retired aerospace workers. A man in a suit from McLean shouted at a woman from Baltimore about tax theft. Then both started yelling at a former official who walked out of a hearing with no comment. Anger made strange temporary allies. Inside the studio, we were drowning in paper. My old contacts started calling again. Some wanted to talk. Some wanted to warn me off. One former Pentagon lawyer told me on a secure line that I was being used by whichever faction wanted staged disclosure. I told him I was too old to care about faction games unless he had documents. He said the transfer site was never only Cape Canaveral or Vandenberg. He said there had been emergency crew capsules staged through Wallops, White Sands, and a Pacific Recovery Corridor. He said human transfers stopped years earlier after Earth 2.0 refused a politically modified passenger list. Then he hung up. I could not confirm all of that, so I did not present it as fact. But 3 hours later, a Wallops Island procurement record hit the leak folder. It referenced medical return capsule exterior salt damage and a recovery vessel owned by a shell company registered in Delaware. Return capsule. That changed the picture again. People had not only gone up, some had come back. The government had not mentioned returns. Returnees meant debriefings, medical isolation, possible families, hidden settlements, or at least graves. The question of returnees became uglier than the passenger lists because returned people could be alive among us. The government confirmed limited historical repatriation under medical and operational constraints. That meant yes, but with more fog. Reporters found 2 cases quickly. A materials engineer who died in Colorado under a sealed federal medical order after long-duration mission. Exposure. A woman in San Antonio who appeared in records first as missing, then as a federal consultant with a new name, then as deceased with no public obituary. Those were not proof of a secret invasion. They were proof of a government comfortable moving human lives between legal categories. Elaine's file came back into my head every time I read those cases, spouse media exposure concern. That one line kept cutting. It meant some official had looked at me, not as a husband or reporter, but as a problem attached to a useful nurse. I wondered if Elaine knew. I wondered if she said no because of me. I wondered if she never heard a word and some committee decided for her. Then I did the only useful thing left and called her old colleague from Fairfax. The woman was 78, sharp, and angry before I finished my second sentence. She said Elaine had been invited to a federal pediatric disaster program in 1991 and turned it down because the clearance terms were too invasive. That answered my question and made no part of it easier. Elaine had seen enough to distrust the offer. She never told me because I was chasing defense stories then, gone half the month, convinced I knew where the secrets were. She had protected our ordinary life by refusing a door I did not know existed. I did not say any of that on air in detail. I said my wife had appeared on an evaluation list and had not gone. I said many families would have similar discoveries in the days ahead and no citizen should assume an evaluation meant transport. I also said the government owed every evaluated person and surviving family a full record, no more sealed excuses. That was the first time I saw a producer cry in the control room. Not because of Elaine, because her brother's name had shown up on another list. The leak had become personal for half the building. One camera operator had an aunt who vanished from a naval medical program. A field producer's grandfather worked at the Newport News plant. A makeup artist from rural Pennsylvania recognized the sealed training school. The story was no longer something we covered. It was under everyone's floor. The 6th day brought the launch panic. A private space company had a heavy cargo launch scheduled from Florida, officially for lunar communications maintenance. It had been planned for months, but timing no longer mattered to the public. Crowds gathered near the space center. Boats entered restricted waters. Online groups claimed the rocket carried elites escaping before the gate closed. Federal agencies said the payload was unmanned and unrelated to Earth 2.0 passenger transfer. That could have been true. It did not matter. The image of a rocket on a pad during the week of disclosure was more than the country could digest. The launch was postponed for weather, then delayed for range safety, then scrubbed pending review. I have covered enough launches to know those words can be normal. This time the scrub came after the 3rd message from Earth 2.0. Unscheduled mass delivery vehicles will be treated as breach attempts. Delivery vehicles, not rockets, not spacecraft, delivery vehicles. The habitat was using its own operational vocabulary, and it clearly had enough tracking to identify launch profiles. A government cannot claim a place is passive when that place is issuing range warnings. That night, the president addressed the nation from the Oval Office. I had seen presidents lie, grieve, stall, flatter, threaten, and beg. This one looked boxed in by history he did not create but had inherited and hidden for long enough to own. He said the public deserved truth. He said not all truth could be released at once without endangering living persons. He said Earth 2.0 represented a grave ethical failure in democratic oversight and a remarkable human survival achievement. Both clauses were true. Putting them together sounded obscene to a lot of people. He announced a special counsel, an international review, family record access, and a temporary halt to all support transfers except life-critical safety traffic. Life-critical safety traffic became the next fight. Cutting off support sounded satisfying until engineers explained what it could mean. If Earth 2.0 still depended on replacement electronics, medication precursors, reactor parts, data uplinks, or specialized manufacturing from Earth, a sudden cutoff could kill civilians, including children born into a program they did not choose. If support continued, citizens saw it as rewarding the secret. That was the trap built decades earlier. Every option was dirty because the clean decision had been stolen from the public long before. The local council on Earth 2.0 understood that trap. The 4th message arrived in a format designed for public release. It addressed people of original Earth, not governments. It said the habitat population did not choose secrecy at birth. It said early generations were raised under restricted truth. Later generations uncovered the full selection history, and the local council had spent years attempting to force disclosure without triggering political capture. It said Earth governments repeatedly tried to revise access rules for leadership families, strategic personnel, and private funders. It said the gate was closed because original Earth kept treating the habitat as property. I read that message on air with the full weight of it in my mouth. I did not ask viewers to believe it automatically. A breakaway population can lie too. Victimhood can become a shield for power. Earth 2.0 had its own command structure, its own secrecy, and its own dead. Still, the message explained one thing better than Washington had. Why now? Maybe the leak was not only from this planet. Maybe someone up there had pushed records down because local control wanted the original builders exposed. That was an interpretation, not a fact. I said so. But every serious analyst in the room was thinking it. The message included one video file. No faces, no children, no sweeping views. Just a 32-second shot of a pressure corridor with handwritten notices on a wall in English, Russian, French, Hindi, Mandarin, Arabic, and Spanish. A gloved hand held a printed card in front of the lens with the day's date. Behind it, people moved in work clothes, carrying tool bags and trays of seedling plugs. The corridor looked worn. Scuffed floor panels, patched insulation, condensation near a ceiling seam. No paradise. No ruin either. A working place, a real place. That was enough to shift millions of viewers from wondering if the habitat existed to arguing over its rights. Rights. That word split every discussion. Did people born in Earth 2.0 have the right to refuse new arrivals? Yes, if it was home. Did taxpayers have the right to accountability for funding and hidden selection? Yes. Did governments have the right to preserve command access after building it? Maybe legally in some old document, but legitimacy had collapsed. Did excluded citizens have a claim to entry? Emotionally, yes. Practically, no. There was no version of opening the gate that did not risk killing the people inside or turning the habitat into a battlefield of national claims. The first death tied to the protest happened outside a federal archive facility in Maryland. A man climbed a security fence after a rumor said family lists were being burned inside. Officers used less lethal rounds. A crowd pushed forward. Someone fell, and by the time medical crews reached him, he was gone. His name was Aaron Pelletier, 56, a postal worker from Laurel. His brother had vanished from a classified biomedical program in 1986. The rumor about burning records was false. The reason he believed it was not, that is what secrecy does. It makes truth and rumor share the same street until someone dies. Cities began setting up local record clinics. Richmond opened a hotline for families tied to defense contractors. Huntsville opened a municipal archive room with volunteer historians. San Diego Hospital started reviewing old fellowship lists. Ames had farmers and retired plant scientists waiting outside a county building before sunrise. In Norfolk, churches held meetings for shipyard families. The crisis became administrative in the daylight and raw at night. People went to work, bought milk, picked up kids, then spent evenings searching for names of the missing in leaked spreadsheets. The seventh day was when the government lost control of the technical story too. A group of former program engineers released a joint letter. Most were old, some were sick, all had lawyers. Said Earth 2.0 began as a limited lunar archive and command survival site, then expanded after a classified assessment concluded that Earth recovery from full nuclear exchange might fail for centuries. It said no single president ever approved the full modern program. Instead, each administration approved extensions, modifications, funding masks, or temporary continuity measures that became permanent. That sounded exactly like Washington. The worst secrets do not always start with one monstrous order. They grow from decisions no one wants to revisit. The engineers confirmed the habitat had industrial capacity, limited but real, additive manufacturing, machine shops, chemical processing, reactor maintenance, water extraction trials using polar ice shipments and later local deposits, regolith-based shielding blocks, glass and ceramic production, protein from algae, fungi, insects, and small livestock modules. That last line upset people more than it should have. But I understood. Citizens wanted the place to be either heaven or fraud. A hard, cramped, functioning settlement full of compromises was harder to hate cleanly and harder to defend cleanly. Then came the security annex. Earth 2.0 had defensive systems. Not an army in the movie sense. No lunar tanks rolling across gray dust. Defense meant access denial. Tracking arrays, docking control, remote cutters for approach vehicles, cyber isolation, physical lockouts, emergency vent barriers. Small interceptor craft designed to push debris or disable uncontrolled inbound objects. Every sealed habitat needs defense against accidents. Every defense against accidents can become defense against people. The local council had the tools to keep Earth out if Earth tried to force entry. That was the quiet military truth under the whole week. The Department of Defense refused to discuss countermeasures. That refusal said enough. A forced access mission would be insane. Even if a crew reached the habitat, the receiving side controlled docking, pressure, air, corridors, power, and local knowledge. You cannot invade a sealed environment without risking the thing you claim to secure. You also cannot leave a breakaway lunar society completely outside legal reach if it holds archives, technology, biological collections, and perhaps evidence of crimes by living officials. That was the policy problem. It had no clean military solution. The personal stories kept pushing through the policy anyway. A grocery clerk in Topeka found her grandmother on a teacher candidate list. A retired firefighter in Queens found his father listed as behavioral incompatibility, rejected. He said he felt relief, then guilt, because rejected meant his father had not abandoned him. A doctor in Atlanta found her own newborn blood screening number in a genetic archive. Transfer table from the 1990s. She had never consented. Her parents had never consented. She was 41 years old and learned from a leak that part of her biology had been sent toward the moon before she learned to read. That detail broke something open in the public mind. Missing adults were one wound. Genetic samples were another. Children who never had a choice had been turned into data for a survival system that might never include them. Officials said archived samples were anonymized. Then researchers found matching tables. Officials said standards were different then. People heard we could get away with it then. Officials said biological preservation served all humanity. People asked why humanity had not been told. Every answer was legally careful and morally weak. By the second week, the first confirmed Earth 2.0 voice transmission was released. It was audio only. The speaker gave her name as Counselor Amara Venn, Civil Systems Administrator, third-generation resident. Her accent was hard to place, with American vowels, clipped British consonants in a few words, and something flatter underneath from people raised by teachers from several countries in sealed rooms. She said the council would cooperate with an independent truth process, but not with direct command restoration. She said no inbound passenger transfers would be accepted. She said Original Earth must stop treating disclosure as a boarding dispute. I played the clip twice, then told viewers to listen to her job title: Civil Systems Administrator, not President, not Commander, not Governor. A habitat is a machine with citizens inside it. Civil systems can mean air, water, waste, heat, food, pressure, medical triage, maintenance schedules, and dispute resolution all tied together. Politics there would not look like politics here. A bad law on Earth can ruin lives over years. A bad maintenance order in Earth 2.0 can kill a sector before dinner. That does not make local rule pure. It makes local rule strict. Amara Venn's statement mentioned something else the government had not explained: the surface inheritance. That phrase sent analysts digging. Surface inheritance turned out to mean all obligations, claims, loyalties, and privileges carried from Original Earth by first-generation residents. Old national rank, old wealth, old citizenship, old titles, old security classifications. The local council had apparently stripped those categories from legal power after internal conflicts. That meant a senator's son and a machinist's daughter became equal under habitat law, at least in theory. It also meant Earth governments lost the social handles used to control people. No wonder officials hated local civil control. The leaked internal history from Earth 2.0 described the inheritance disputes with uncomfortable detail. First-wave residents carried national identities and chain-of-command expectations. Second-wave residents included families added through political pressure. Technical staff resented leadership families. Children born there questioned why Original Earth status mattered in a place where everyone used the same air. After the Nereid contamination event, medical and agricultural crews gained authority because survival depended on them. Security crews tried to enforce old command channels. The conflict stopped short of open civil war, according to the records, but several sectors were locked down for weeks. That was when the phrase "backup failed" started trending. I push back on that. Failed means the system did not work. Earth 2.0 did work in one hard sense. People were alive, crops grew, children were born, knowledge survived. The problem was that the original mission had become morally and politically obsolete. A backup for humanity had turned into a separate human society with its own fear of the planet that built it. That is not simple failure. That is consequence. The government hated that framing because consequence points backward. It asks who made the decisions that produced the present. It asks why the public was kept outside the law. It asks which families gained access through influence. It asks which communities were mined for labor, biology, and knowledge without representation. It asks why a place built to save humanity developed a vocabulary for protecting itself from humanity. Nobody in a suit wanted to answer any of that live. A classified school video leaked on the 10th day. It showed children in Earth 2.0 learning about Original Earth. The teacher stood in front of a wall screen with a map of the world and explained oceans, seasons, open weather, animal migration, cities, and war. The lesson was careful, not hateful. Then a boy asked why people on Original Earth were not told about the habitat. The teacher paused too long. She said adults made fear-based choices during a dangerous time, and later adults failed to correct them. A girl asked if Original Earth would come to take the habitat back. The teacher said safety rules existed for that reason. That clip did more than any briefing to show the emotional distance. Children up there had been raised to prepare for us. The line hurt people. It should have. We are not used to being the hazard in someone else's emergency drill. Americans especially are trained by habit to think of rescue moving outward from here. Helicopters arrive, ships arrive, aid arrives, experts arrive. In that classroom, Original Earth was the unstable outside force, not evil in every face, not a single enemy, but dangerous at scale. Any honest adult watching the weak on the ground had to admit the children had not been taught from nothing. By then, county sheriffs were dealing with local copycat panic. People reported fake Earth 2.0 buses taking children from schools. None were real. Armed men stopped a contractor van in rural Virginia because social media claimed it carried archive records. It carried insulation. A woman in California drove through a gate at an aerospace office and broke both legs because she believed her husband's file was inside. Churches and civic groups tried to calm people, but every correction sounded like one more institution asking for trust it had not earned. I kept telling viewers to slow down, which is a terrible thing to say when the government just admitted a secret lunar society exists. Still, it was necessary. Do not chase vans. Do not harass teachers with old federal fellowships. Do not threaten retired engineers who may have built one valve without knowing the destination. Demand records. Demand hearings. Demand names through law. Rage without discipline helps the people who want this buried again. I said that and meant it. I also knew discipline was a hard sell after 40 years of discipline had protected the secret, not the public. The special counsel's office opened a public intake portal and it crashed in 9 minutes. That small failure became a national joke for about 10 minutes, then it became another symbol. The government could hide a moon habitat for decades, but could not keep a records website running under public load. I know that sounds cheap. It was also exactly how ordinary citizens experience power. The state can classify your mother's file, deny your request, redact your father's name, and lose your appeal. Then, when truth finally breaks open, the upload button does not work. On the 11th day, the first bipartisan bill was introduced. It required full disclosure of selection criteria, passenger transfer records, genetic archive sources, all Earth-based support contracts, all known communications with Earth 2.0, and any legal agreements recognizing local authority. It also prohibited political family access, private purchase of transfer rights, and destruction of records. The bill had one poison clause. It declared Earth 2.0 a strategic asset of the United States and partner nations. That clause made passage easier in Washington and made cooperation impossible with the local council. Earth 2.0 rejected the bill within 2 hours. Amara Ven's second audio statement was colder. She said no society can be both a person and a tool. She said residents would not submit to asset classification. She said local archives contained evidence of unlawful access demands by multiple Earth governments. She said release would be staged if command restoration attempts continued. That was a threat, but a specific one. Earth 2.0 had files. Maybe passenger corruption, maybe genetic theft, maybe illegal funding, maybe proof that living officials lied under oath. Washington went very quiet after that. That quiet told me more than the words. Governments do not fear accusations they can easily disprove. They wait, deny, and bury the accuser in process. This was different. Emergency meetings started spare before sunrise. Lawyers from 3 agencies arrived at the White House. Foreign ambassadors came through side entrances. Former presidents issued statements written by committees in fear. A retired defense secretary canceled a public appearance for health reasons. Maybe he was ill. Maybe he had just learned what local archives could show. The next leak proved at least one part of Amara Ven's threat. A set of access memoranda from the late 1990s showed senior officials debating whether a limited number of constitutional continuity families should be moved during a period of nuclear tension. Technical staff warned against adding untrained dependents. Medical staff warned against stress on pediatric capacity. A political office argued that legitimacy required recognized leadership bloodlines. Leadership bloodlines. In an American document, I read that phrase on air and had to stop for a second because there was no clean way to say it, without making it sound medieval. It was real. It was typed, circulated, and archived. Public anger shifted from general betrayal to class fury. People had suspected the rich and powerful had seats. The memorandum did not prove a full escape list, but it proved the thought process existed in official channels. There is a difference between emergency governance and hereditary survival privilege. Every diner, factory break room, farm office, hospital hallway, and school pickup line in the country understood that difference. A janitor's child had no seat. A senator's grandchild might have been debated under legitimacy. That sentence traveled faster than any correction. The White House denied any leadership bloodline policy had been adopted. That may be true. It is also not the whole issue. A democracy can be damaged by proposals even if blocked, when those proposals reveal what powerful people considered acceptable behind closed doors. Earth 2.0's own record suggested technical crews resisted those transfers. That fact complicated the popular story again. The people inside the habitat may have blocked some of the ugliest demands from Earth. That did not make the habitat innocent. It did mean the moral map was not simple enough for slogans. By the 3rd week, the world had learned the daily rhythm of the crisis. Morning brought hearings, afternoon brought leaks, evening brought protests. Night brought messages from Earth 2.0 or statements denying messages. People still went to work because rent did not pause for history. Truck drivers still hauled food. Nurses still checked blood pressure. Teachers still took attendance while students asked if classmates could be chosen for space without knowing. Grocery stores sold out of certain emergency foods, not because people expected lunar travel, but because the old fear of being excluded had become household behavior. The religious response was not one thing. Some pastors called Earth 2.0 a sin of pride. Some called it an ark built by liars. Some called it proof that humans could preserve life through knowledge. Rabbis, imams, priests, chaplains, and lay leaders argued over obligation, consent, and whether children born inside the habitat carried guilt from the selection system. Most serious ones said no. Children do not choose the door that locks behind them. That line helped calm some families. It enraged others who wanted someone alive to blame. The legal scholars had a worse time. If Earth 2.0 was built by nations, did nations own it? If residents were born there, could a treaty made before birth bind them? If crime funded the place, did that undermine sovereignty or strengthen claims for restitution? If genetic samples were taken without consent, did descendants have rights to removal, deletion, or return? If the habitat held cultural archives from multiple countries, who controlled access? Every answer created another question. The law had been denied daylight for so long that it grew in a sealed room with no public roots. I started using that phrase on air, then stopped because it sounded too polished. This story did not need pretty language. It needed plain facts. People were selected in secret. Money was moved in secret. Biology was moved in secret. Some families were broken by secret transfer. Some people in the habitat were born into the result and now refused command from the planet that lied to both sides. That was the cleanest version I could give without pretending the answer was easy. The first live exchange between Earth officials and Earth 2.0 happened on day 23. It was not televised live, but a transcript came out 6 hours later. The United States delegation requested joint inspection, archive preservation, and medical verification of resident welfare. Earth 2.0 agreed to remote medical verification through independent observers, rejected physical inspection, and demanded public release of all Earth-held selection records before any further governance talks. The European delegation proposed international trusteeship. Earth 2.0 rejected trusteeship. Russia demanded access rights from Soviet-era participation. Earth 2.0 rejected inherited state claims. China demanded full technical transparency. Earth 2.0 said original Earth had not earned that. That last line set off another round of outrage. Who were 40,000 people in a sealed lunar habitat to judge 8 billion people on Earth? Fair question. The counter-question was worse. Who were the governments of Earth to demand obedience after hiding the habitat from the same 8 billion people? Two arrogant positions can face each other and both contain truth. I said that and got angry messages from every direction, which usually means you are standing near the hard part. The remote medical verification became the first possible bridge. Independent doctors from Switzerland, Ghana, Chile, Japan, and New Zealand were proposed. Earth 2.0 accepted 2 names and rejected 3 due to institutional ties. Earth governments objected to the veto. Families objected to waiting. Engineers warned against forcing the issue. For the first time, the debate slowed into actual negotiation instead of public fire. That should have been good news. Then the Brazilian archive dispute exploded. Brazilian researchers found evidence that plant, fungal, and microbial samples from protected Amazon regions had been transferred through a United States university partnership in the 1980s and 90s. Some samples came from indigenous territories under research agreements that did not mention off-world storage. Brazil demanded return or shared control. Indigenous leaders demanded names of researchers and all derivative work. Earth 2.0 answered before Washington did. The local council said biological archives from non-consenting communities would be sealed from applied use pending a restitution process. That answer was faster and clearer than any Earth government response, and it made officials here look worse. I do not say that to praise Earth 2.0 blindly. A sealed council can issue clean moral statements when it does not face voters, courts, lobbyists, cable shouting, or street pressure. It can also hide whatever it wants behind airlock language. Still, in that moment, it sounded more direct than Washington. People noticed. That became the first sign of a dangerous shift in public feeling. Some citizens began treating Earth 2.0 not as the crime, but as the whistleblower. The government knew that was a problem. If the public trusted the breakaway habitat more than elected officials, every negotiation would tilt. So officials released a darker file. It showed Earth 2.0 had once denied returned to a group of 17 residents exposed to a respiratory illness during an Earthside medical rotation. The group was quarantined in a surface facility in Nevada. 3 died, 14 recovered. The habitat refused to take them back for years because reintegration risk was considered unacceptable. Families inside Earth 2.0 protested, and local security suppressed the protest. No gunfire in the file, still suppression. Locked corridors, food ration pressure, work assignment penalties. The habitat had its own harsh history. That file mattered. It reminded everyone that survival systems can become cruel without villains in every room. A sealed society under constant risk will call many things necessary. Earth governments did that here. Earth 2.0 did it there. The language changes. The habit does not. Once leaders learn to place a system above a person, paperwork can make almost anything sound responsible. That was the lesson I had missed for years while chasing individual decisions. The 14th recovered returnee from Nevada became public by choice. His name was David Sorrell. He was 82, living in Oregon under a federal identity shield, and he walked into a local newspaper office with his medical file in a grocery bag. He had been a hydraulic technician in Earth 2.0 for 6 years in the 1990s, sent back for treatment after lung damage from a coolant fire, then blocked from returning because of contamination rules and political embarrassment. He had a daughter inside the habitat. She was 4 when he left. He had never heard her adult voice. David Sorrell gave the first grounded description of life inside, and it cut through fantasy. He talked about noise from fans that never stopped, water discipline, weak coffee made from rationed imports and later plant substitutes, birthdays in common rooms, arguments over tool checkout, crop failures, kids learning to move in low gravity and then being strapped into spin rooms until hips and legs ached, security officers who hated being called guards, engineers sleeping under work tables during pressure emergencies. He said some people loved the place because it was home. Some hated it because no door led outside without permission in a suit. When asked if Earth 2.0 should open, he cried without hiding it. Then he said no, not fast, not under pressure, not for politics. He said original Earth would crush the place with demands before the first month ended. He also said the habitat owed records, apologies, and a path for divided families. That answer sounded human because it disappointed every camp equally. I trusted it more than most official statements. Day 30 brought the first real contact between a surface family and a habitat resident. It was arranged through the independent medical channel after brutal negotiation. David Sorrell spoke to his daughter for 9 minutes. The recording was private at first, then both gave permission for one edited minute to be released. I will not repeat the private parts. The public minute had no grand statement. He said her name. She said she remembered his hands. He apologized. She said she had been told he died for safety reasons, and she had hated him for leaving until she learned the truth. That was enough. Millions watched a secret become a family wound in real time. After that, the pressure for family contact became unstoppable. The government tried to create categories: immediate relatives, verified transfer records, no active security concerns, habitat consent required. Earth 2.0 created its own categories: resident consent, psychological support, no political exploitation, no media coercion. No claims of custody over adults born there. The first list had 200 possible calls. Then 6,000 people applied from Earth in one day. Some had real claims. Many had hope. Hope became another overloaded system. The technical support question returned when Earth 2.0 reported degradation in a reactor coolant monitoring array. That was the first time the habitat asked for something after saying no one else could come. It requested specialized components through unmanned transfer with inspection by both sides and no biological cargo. Critics on Earth said, let the breakaway society fix itself. Engineers said a monitoring failure could threaten thousands. Families said children should not be punished for state crimes. The president authorized the cargo after congressional consultation, and a court challenge failed because judges were not ready to rule that public anger justified possible mass death. The cargo launch from Florida became the most watched machine movement in human history up to that point. No crew, no secret passengers. Cameras showed the payload fairing assembly, the sealed component containers, the independent observers, the weight checks, the biological screening swabs, the armed federal officers, the protesters outside the perimeter, and the families holding photographs near the causeway. When the rocket lifted, nobody cheered in the studio. It was not a triumph. It was a maintenance shipment to a place that should not have been hidden and could not be abandoned without becoming worse than the crime that created it. Earth 2.0 accepted the cargo through remote docking. The public feed showed only telemetry and a grainy exterior camera. Still millions watched. A small object crossed black space toward a receiving node built under a ridge no naked eye on Earth could see. The receiving node confirmed capture. 3 hours later, Amara Venn sent a message. Components received, no breach, civilian system stabilized. Thank you to the workers who built what was needed. Not thank you to governments. Workers. That word was chosen with care. American labor groups seized on it. Shipyard workers, machinists, nurses, and agricultural workers demanded representation in the truth process. Not only politicians and intelligence officials. They argued workers built Earth 2.0 without knowing the truth and deserved standing. I thought that was one of the saner demands of the whole crisis. The people who made the hidden system real had been treated as tools by secrecy. Bringing them into the record was not symbolism. It was evidence repair. The first public hearing with workers was better than the classified briefings because nobody used polished language for long. A retired welder from Newport News told Congress he built pressure rings with tolerances tighter than anything he had seen in ship repair, and was told it was for deep-sea research. A nurse from Bethesda described training modules for childbirth under remote gravitational stress and said she thought it was theoretical. A teacher from Pennsylvania said she recorded lessons for children she never met and later wondered why the scripts avoided weather, pets, and playgrounds. A machinist from Ohio held up his old pay stub and asked if his hands had helped build a country that would have left him behind. No official answered him directly. That became the clip of the day. His hands were large, scarred, and stiff. He was not dramatic. He was tired. He said his wife needed insulin in 1998, and the insurance company fought them for every refill, while his tax dollars and labor helped build a medical reserve off-world. That is the kind of detail no policy memo survives. It puts the whole crime into a pharmacy line. Earth 2.0 released its own labor record after that hearing. It listed first-generation residents by skill category, not full name. Engineers, nurses, agronomists, electricians, mechanics, teachers, waste system operators, security staff, food technicians. A note said many first-generation residents were told families on Earth would be given full benefits, records, and death truth if return became impossible. That promise was not kept by Earth governments. The Habitat Council said it would cooperate with family notification using local resident consent. That was the first statement from the council that sounded less defensive and more ashamed. The shame mattered. Until then, every side had performed innocence. Government said old security rules prevented disclosure. The Habitat said local survival required closure. Families said no reason could justify exclusion. Workers said labor had been stolen. All of that had truth in it, but no healing starts while everyone speaks only from the cleanest corner. The Habitat's admission that first-generation families had been failed opened a narrow path, not enough, but real. The conspiracy market did not slow down. It never does. People claimed Earth 2.0 had armies ready to descend. False. People claimed every missing celebrity had gone there. False. People claimed the habitat was empty and all messages were artificial intelligence. Unproven and contradicted by too much human evidence. People claimed the moon was fake, which did not deserve airtime. I refused to spend minutes swatting every stupid thing. I told viewers the strongest evidence was already strange enough. Do not add nonsense to make truth feel bigger. Truth was big enough. On day 42, the Independent Medical Channel released the first welfare report. It was limited but meaningful. Population within previously stated range. No evidence of immediate mass casualty. Chronic health issues tied to low-gravity exposure, radiation management, nutrient limitations, psychological stress and generational isolation. Medical care functional but resource-constrained. Pediatric population present. Elder care strain. Air, water, and food system stable but dependent on continued maintenance and selective imports. No evidence residents requested evacuation. No evidence residents were physically prevented from collective representation. The wording was careful. It did not call Earth 2.0 free. It called it alive. Alive was enough to calm one fear and sharpen another. If people there wanted rescue, Earth might claim a moral duty to enter. If people there did not want rescue, Earth had to face the harder truth. The excluded public was not being kept from a prison. It was being kept from a society that had no room for sudden mass entry and no desire to return to command. That did not erase the founding crime. It made remedies harder. The legal remedy proposals became almost surreal. Some wanted a lottery for future births or residency exchanges. Engineers said no. Some wanted monetary reparations from contractors and governments to families of transferred or evaluated people. Possible, though money was not enough. Some wanted all genetic archives duplicated back to Earth and then deleted there. Technically messy. Morally necessary in some cases. Some wanted Earth 2.0 recognized as independent if it opened records. Others called that rewarding theft. Some wanted an international court. Fine, if any defendant lived long enough and any classified file survived challenge. I began ending each broadcast block with what was confirmed, what was likely, and what remained unknown. Confirmed, Earth 2.0 existed. Confirmed, it was a lunar subsurface habitat, not a second planet. Confirmed, multiple governments and contractors supported it for decades. Confirmed, selection protocols existed. Confirmed, local civil control now rejected original Earth command. Confirmed. Records were hidden from the public. Likely. Political access pressure occurred. Likely. Unauthorized biological archives included non-consenting people and communities. Unknown. Full population, full casualty history, complete passenger list, and the true source of the first leak. That last unknown kept bothering me. The leak was too broad for one staffer. It included Earthside files, foreign references, habitat messages, and local council framing. It looked less like a leak and more like a forced opening by multiple hands. Maybe an Earth official wanted to expose rivals. Maybe Earth 2.0 sent records through old channels. Maybe workers and families had been collecting proof for years. Maybe all three happened at once. Big secrets rarely break from one hammer strike. Usually the wall is already cracked, and everyone later argues who swung first. The answer came partly from a young systems archivist in Earth 2.0 who used the name Tomas Wren. He released a statement through the council, then appeared by audio with independent observers. He said a group of resident archivists, Earth-based descendants, and retired support workers had coordinated disclosure after learning that several Earth governments planned a renewed command access package tied to climate instability and elite evacuation requests. He said the phrase Earth 2.0 had been chosen in old planning documents to sound technical, not public. He said residents hated it. Their local name was simply the Basin. The Basin, that name landed differently. Earth 2.0 was a project title written by planners. The Basin was a home name, plain local. It referred to the main subsurface complex built around a sealed depression under the Farside Highlands. After that, many of us started using both names, Earth 2.0 for the scandal and program, the Basin for the people living there. The distinction helped. A program can be guilty. People born inside it still have names, routines, grudges, jokes, bad plumbing, school exams, and sick relatives. Tomas Wren's statement carried the biggest accusation yet. He said original Earth authorities had attempted to upload command restoration packets 3 times in the last decade. In simple terms, software and authorization packages meant to reassert control over habitat systems, archives, docking rules, or governance logs. Earth officials called this contingency synchronization. The Basin called it a coup attempt. I could not verify the full technical claim, but leaked logs showed rejected authentication attempts using old national command keys. That was enough to make the word coup stop sounding theatrical. The White House said no current administration had attempted to override civil systems. Current, that word again. Current is a small room where officials hide from history. Former officials stayed quiet. The Basin released one authentication log with timestamps, key identifiers, and a rejected command path aimed at docking authorization. Independent cryptographers said the log format appeared consistent with older program architecture. not proof beyond all doubt. Strong enough that denial without documents became useless. This was when I stopped thinking of the crisis as disclosure and started thinking of it as divorce. Not between husband and wife, between a planet and a child society built without consent, raised under control, and now old enough to refuse. Divorce is messy because both sides remember the same years differently and both can point to real injuries. Original Earth built the basin, funded it, fed it, staffed it, and lied about it. The basin survived, suffered, changed, and now held evidence against the builder. No court could make that family whole by ordering everyone back to dinner. I did not use that phrasing on air because it leaned too neat, but it guided my thinking. Every demand for simple ownership ignored generations born there. Every demand for simple independence ignored stolen money, stolen samples, and stolen choice here. Every demand for immediate entry ignored habitat limits. Every demand for total cutoff ignored civilians dependent on systems nobody on Earth had the moral right to sabotage. The only path left was records. Restitution, negotiated contact, strict biological controls, and recognition that no one alive could reset the beginning. The most frightening message arrived on day 51. It was not dramatic, no threat language, no countdown. It came as a governance notice from the Basin Council. It said any original Earth launch vehicle on an intercept profile without prior bilateral clearance would be physically redirected or disabled by access safety systems. It said debris protection platforms had been placed under local authority. It said the basin had no intention of military action against original Earth, but would prevent uncontrolled approach. The Department of Defense called the statement irresponsible. Engineers called it predictable. Markets called it bad and moved accordingly. A lot of viewers asked if the basin could strike Earth. I said there was no evidence of offensive capability aimed at Earth cities, and people needed to stop turning every technical system into a doomsday weapon in the first sentence. Access denial is not the same as bombardment. Still, physics is physics. Any society controlling objects in lunar space, propulsion, and tracking has strategic weight. Even without weapons, it can block missions, embarrass governments, expose archives, or alter the politics of space access. That was enough to change the balance. The backup was no longer passive. The International Review Team finally got remote visual access to one medical sector, one agricultural sector, one schoolroom after hours, and one mechanical bay. The images were dull, which made them powerful. A nurse checking a medication locker. Rows of leafy greens under bright panels, a taped sign reminding workers to log tool use before leaving. A maintenance crew replacing a valve with 3 observers watching. A classroom wall with student drawings of Earth, the Moon, and a corridor labeled home. No grand reveal. Real places rarely perform for cameras. Viewers wrote in saying the drawings broke them. Some were angry that children were taught to call a corridor home. Some said children anywhere draw what they know. Both reactions made sense. I thought about kids in military housing, mining towns, ships, farms, refugee camps, high-rise apartments, and border stations. Children can make home in places adults consider temporary, cruel, or strange. That does not absolve the adults. It does warn against speaking about those children as cargo. The first restitution fund passed before the full truth process even began. It targeted families of confirmed transferred personnel, workers misled about classified destination, and communities whose biological material had been archived without proper consent. Critics called it hush money. Some of it probably was. Still, some families needed medical care, legal help, and funeral correction now, not after 10 years of hearings. I told viewers to take the money if eligible and keep demanding records. Accepting help does not erase the claim unless lawyers sneak poison into the paper. Write everything, bring counsel, do not let grief sign away truth. That advice brought another flood of calls, and this time they were not about the moon. They were about everyday fear. A woman in Richmond asked if her child's school science program could still collect cheek swabs. A farmer in Iowa asked if seed companies had hidden clauses. A retired Marine asked if military blood samples were ever truly destroyed. A teacher asked if students should be told the full story or protected until adults knew more. The crisis had entered ordinary trust. Science forms, medical consent, employment clearances, university research, space launches, even disaster drills. All of it now carried a shadow from Earth 2.0. I hated that part because public distrust can harm people too. Vaccines save lives. Medical research saves lives. Seed banks matter. Disaster planning matters. If the lesson becomes never trust any institution, more people get hurt. If the lesson becomes trust institutions after one apology, the same abuse returns with better wording. The harder lesson is slower. Demand consent. Demand oversight. Demand records. Fund the boring watchdogs. Protect whistleblowers. Do not let fear turn every expert into an enemy or every official into a priest. By day 60, the first formal talks opened under international observation in Geneva. No one called it a peace conference, but it had that weight. Original Earth governments sat on one side. Basin representatives appeared by secure video from a plain room with a pressure hatch visible behind them. Families, labor groups, indigenous representatives, medical ethicists, space law experts, and engineers had advisory seats. That mix was messy and necessary. For once, the people harmed by the program were not only watching from outside. The talks began with records because records are the beginning of repair. Passenger transfers, candidate evaluations, rejections, deaths, births. Returnees, biological archive, support contracts, command attempts, internal casualty events, political access requests, worker deception. Every category had privacy concerns, security claims, and family rights tangled together. The first agreement was small. A joint missing persons process with 3 levels of disclosure: confirmed transferred, confirmed not transferred, and unresolved. It sounded bureaucratic. It also meant thousands of families would stop living inside pure uncertainty. The second agreement was harder. No inbound human transfer for 5 years except medical return approved by both sides and the receiving individual. That angered people who wanted access. It reassured the basin. It acknowledged habitat limits. It also killed, at least for now, the fantasy that Earth 2.0 could become an escape valve for climate, war, plague, or rich panic. The lifeboat was not open. Maybe it never should be, not in the way the original planners imagined. A lifeboat that leaves most people to drown and then declares itself a nation leaves a permanent scar. The third agreement nearly failed. Biological archive consent. The basin agreed to inventory human-derived and community-derived samples, freeze disputed use, and allow deletion or restricted retention claims where source identity could be established. Earth governments agreed to release source pathways, including military and medical collection programs. That agreement threatened major universities, pharmaceutical firms, military medical systems, and old research foundations. Good. A truth process that threatens nobody is usually a ceremony. Late that night, after the first Geneva session, I got one more file connected to Elaine. It was not from the government. It came through her old colleague, who had kept a photocopy of the Federal Pediatric Disaster Program invitation. The language was polite and deadening. Remote continuity medicine, extended isolation readiness, family separation contingency, security review of spouse media ties. Elaine had written one sentence in the margin before declining. This is not medicine if the patient list is chosen in secret. That was my wife, and it was better than any speech I had made all month. I read that sentence to myself in the studio and did not put it on air. Some things can stay mine for a little while, but it changed the way I ended that night's broadcast. I told viewers the Earth 2.0 crisis was not about whether humans should prepare for catastrophe. We should. Only fools refuse to prepare. It was about whether preparation can remain human when the patient list is secret, when the builders are misled, when the public pays without consent, when the children of the chosen inherit both safety and confinement, and when the truth arrives only after the backup learns to lock out its makers. The country did not settle after Geneva. Anyone expecting closure does not understand history. Hearings continued. Lawsuits multiplied. Former officials hired lawyers. Contractors ran apology advertisements nobody believed. Families found names. Some found nothing. Some learned a loved one had died on Earth after all and had never touched the program. Even that became its own grief because hope had been given and removed. The basin sent more records in batches, each one reopening anger and relief in different houses. One of the last records in the first month concerned the Nereid contamination event. The Fuller file showed no alien organism, no secret monster, no impossible biology. It was a cascade failure. A fungal contaminant likely entered through an Earth-origin shipment of agricultural substrate. Survived screening because the test protocol looked for the wrong markers, spread through a nutrient film system, damaged root structures, entered air handling through maintenance disturbance, and caused severe respiratory disease in vulnerable residents. The deaths were awful. The cause was ordinary enough to be terrifying. A closed world can be injured by a bad assumption. That file explained the message. Do not send anyone else. It was not only politics, it was memory. The basin had buried children because Earth sent something small and trusted and wrong. Then Earth governments kept pushing access demands. After that, every incoming person, crate, sample, and command packet carried a history. I did not have to agree with every basin decision to understand why the gates stayed closed. The final broadcast I agreed to do on the crisis came 68 days after the first Crystal City Shredder video. I was exhausted, and so was everyone else. The news cycle had moved in pieces the way it always does, but Earth 2.0 had not gone away. It had become a standing fact in human life. There was Earth, and there was the basin under the far side lunar highlands, alive, limited, angry, dependent in some ways, independent in others, carrying our archives and our crimes in its own. I told viewers what I could say without dressing it up. The government confirmed Earth 2.0 because the secret broke, not because conscience woke up on schedule. The habitat exists because smart people solved hard engineering problems and powerful people solved moral problems by hiding them. The basin refuses more arrivals because it has its own dead, its own law, its own children, and its own fear of us. Original Earth is furious because exclusion was real, theft was real, and democratic consent was treated as a nuisance. Every side can point to danger. Every side can point to injury. None of that cancels the central fact that the public should have known. I also said the phrase that got me invited onto fewer panels afterward. Earth 2.0 was never a backup for humanity. It was a backup for a version of humanity selected by frightened institutions. The basin may become something better than its origin. Original Earth may become more honest because the lie finally failed. Or both places may spend the next century punishing each other for decisions made by dead men in secure rooms. That choice had not been made yet. After the camera shut down, I walked out into the Virginia night and found 3 people waiting by the studio gate. One was a college kid holding a sign that said release the lists. One was a retired woman with a folder of hospital papers. One was a man in a delivery uniform who just wanted to know where to send his father's name. No chanting, no big scene. Just people standing under harsh security lights with paper in their hands asking for the record of a life. That is what the whole thing came down to after all the moon talk. Names, choices, bodies, work, children, doors. I gave the man the intake address, told the woman which legal clinic had opened in Richmond, and told the kid not to let anyone turn this into a team sport. He nodded, but I do not know if he heard me. He was young and angry, and young anger is not always wrong. Then I drove home past dark office parks and apartment windows and gas stations selling coffee to night shift. Workers, all of it ordinary, all of it still here. The world had not ended because another human settlement existed above us. The world had changed because the old one had been caught deciding who mattered. When I got home, my daughter was awake at the kitchen table with Elaine's file printed in front of her. She asked me if her mother would have gone if I had not been listed as a concern. I told her the truth. No. Elaine had written her answer in the margin. Secret medicine was not medicine. Secret survival was not civilization. My daughter cried then. Not loudly, and I sat with her until the sun came up over a country that had spent decades paying for a second home in the dark. The next morning, the Basin sent one more public line through the Geneva Channel. It was not a threat. It was not an apology. It said, "We will preserve what was entrusted to us, return what was taken without consent where return is possible, and refuse any authority that treats our lives as equipment." People argued over every word by noon. Of course they did. That is what free people do when finally handed a piece of truth. I keep that line beside Elaine's margin note now, not because it fixes anything. It does not. But both sentences point at the same hard rule. A person is not equipment. A child is not a continuity asset. A worker is not a blind hand for a secret future. A citizen is not a funding source with no right to ask who gets saved. If Earth 2.0 teaches us anything worth keeping, it is not that humans can build a hidden world under lunar rock. It is that survival without consent comes back one day and demands a hearing. So if you are listening to this now, after the hearings, after the first family calls, after the first cargo launch, after the first records came out, do not let the size of the story make it abstract. That is how people escape responsibility. Keep it concrete. Ask for names, ask for contracts, ask who signed, ask who paid, ask who died. Ask who was born into the locked place and who was left outside without knowing a door existed. Ask why the first message from our supposed backup was not welcome home, but do not send anyone else. Because that is the part I cannot shake. Not the lunar tunnels, not the reactor galleries, not the seed vaults or the old launch manifests. The first honest sentence from Earth 2.0 was a refusal. It was a society saying no to the planet that built it. Maybe that no saved lives inside the Basin. Maybe it protected leaders who still owe us truth. Maybe it did both at the same time. Real history is ugly that way. I only know this much. The backup is not waiting for us. It is watching us, negotiating with us, judging us, and guarding its doors. And down here on original Earth, people are still walking into county offices with old photographs. Still opening sealed boxes in garages, still calling hotlines that put them on hold, still learning that a father, a nurse, a teacher, a machinist, a child's blood sample, a seed collection, or a handwritten lesson plan was part of a hidden future. The crisis did not end with confirmation. Confirmation was just the first day the lies stopped doing all the talking.